Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to see all of you right here in the grand ballroom. For those of you already here, we invite you to make your way to your seats. I know many of you are very happy to see each other physically. It's been quite a while. We invite you to take your seats as we will start the proceedings of the day very soon. Also, we'd like to give one and all a gentle reminder to ensure that you have your mobile devices switched to the silent mode. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we will start very shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to welcome our guest of honor, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore and Minister for Finance. Please welcome Mr. Lawrence Wong. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a good Singapore morning to you all and welcome to the Singapore International Energy Week 2002. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so nice to see yet again another physical event right here in Singapore. Proudly to see all of you coming from all over the world to spend your time with us right here. Let's start by welcoming each other with a very nice round of applause, everyone. Good to see you here. Thank you for being here in Singapore. My name is Ravi Nadesan, and I'm very proud and happy and honored, of course, to be your host for today's program. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this year we celebrate the 15th edition of SIEW. Now, since its conception in 2008, SIEW has brought together more than 200,000 energy players from 130, yes, 130 countries to discuss pertinent energy issues impacting the world and, of course, our region. In commemoration of this 15th edition of Ladies and Gentlemen, we've launched SIEWcast in collaboration with Singapore Press Holdings radio station Money FM 89.3 and in partnership with ExxonMobil. Ladies and gentlemen, aligned with the global energy community's pursuit for greener energy future, our sessions across this entire week will address this year's SIEW theme, and that, of course, a resilient and sustainable energy future. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pride to invite up on stage our guest of honor, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, to deliver the Singapore Energy Lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, here is DPM Wong.
My parliamentary colleague, Mr. Gan Kim Yong, Excellencies and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to join you at this year's Singapore International Energy Week, especially after having gone through 2.5 years of restrictions due to the pandemic. This feels like a little bit of a homecoming for me, also because I was the one who started the first edition of the Energy Week back in 2008, when I was the Chief Executive of the Energy Market Authority. Since then, the forum has continued to grow and has now become one of the premier energy events in the region. And I understand we have more than 10,000 energy leaders, professionals, and youths from over 80 countries joining us this week. It's great to see everyone today, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all our overseas guests. Welcome, everyone. The theme of this year's Energy Week, a resilient and sustainable energy future, could not be more appropriate given the challenges we face today. Energy issues continue to loom large for countries everywhere. The ongoing war in Ukraine has disrupted energy supplies worldwide, and countries are all racing to build up their energy stockpiles. Some have had to turn to fossil fuels ahead of the winter season. But even as we seek to enhance energy security, we must redouble efforts to green our energy sources, because climate change is happening at an even faster pace than before, exacerbating the energy crisis. Unusual weather patterns like heat waves and droughts are throwing energy markets around the world into turmoil. The energy crisis and the climate crisis have become a vicious cycle. And the world cannot afford to choose between an energy crisis and a climate crisis. To have energy security, we will need to resolve the climate crisis too. Singapore has long been grappling with both challenges. We chose natural gas as our main energy source early on, as it is the cleanest fossil fuel and emits less carbon dioxide than coal or fuel oil. Natural gas also met our requirement for energy security, as we are able to diversify our sources of gas supply. In fact, in my previous incarnation, the other responsibility I had was to negotiate our first LNG contracts and build our first LNG terminal to import from suppliers worldwide. And today we have built up significant storage capacity and enhanced the security of power generation in Singapore with long-term LNG supply contracts. Over the years, we have continued to explore additional options like solar energy and electricity imports to complement natural gas. But compared to energy security, climate change poses a bigger challenge for Singapore. Unlike many other countries, we do not have options when it comes to renewable energy, scalable options. We do not have the land for large solar or wind farms, or fast-flowing rivers for hydroelectric power. Nevertheless, we have managed to defy our natural constraints and made progress in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We were able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 32% below business as usual levels in 2020. This is double the earlier commitment of 16% below BAU levels, which we made in 2009 ahead of the Copenhagen summit. We have achieved this by becoming more energy efficient and keeping our emissions per GDP dollar one of the lowest in the world. So that's what we have achieved up to now in 2020. And this has given us also the confidence to look ahead and to consider how we can strengthen further our commitment to climate action. At last year's UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, or COP26, countries were urged to get to net zero emissions by or around the middle of the century. Singapore has heeded this call. Over the past year, we have reviewed our decarbonization plans to see if we can do more. We examined several factors, including whether firms have viable technological solutions available to green their operations, whether there were global carbon mitigation opportunities available to Singapore to help us decarbonize, and whether domestically we have the necessary policy and regulatory frameworks in place to mobilize households and businesses to shift their behavior. We also observed some positive global trends. There are growing investments in decarbonization technologies, and there is also a stronger desire for international collaboration in areas like carbon markets, which will provide additional avenues to decarbonize. So all of these developments gave us the confidence that Singapore can achieve a net zero future sooner rather than later. And that's why this morning I'm happy to announce that we will enhance our 2030 nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. We have previously committed to peak our emissions in 2030 at 65 million tons of CO2 equivalent. We will now aim to peak our emissions earlier and reduce our emissions to around 60 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2030. This 5 million tons improvement is significant. It is equivalent to reducing our current transport emissions by 2/3. These enhanced 2030 targets will put us in good state to achieve our longer-term goal of getting to net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050 is really a stretch target for us as we have limited options to deploy renewable energy at scale. But we will press ahead with this ambitious goal. Even though Singapore accounts for only 0.1% of global emissions, we want to do our part in the global effort to address the global climate crisis and steward our resources for future generations. So we will submit these enhanced targets to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as parties to the Paris Agreement meeting at COP27 next month, in line with the Glasgow Climate Pact. Like all parties, our ability to fulfill our pledges will depend on the continued international commitment by everyone to the Paris Agreement and their climate pledges. And because we are an alternative energy disadvantaged nation, it will also be contingent on the maturity of decarbonization technologies and effective international cooperation. But that does not mean that we will just sit back and hope for the cards to fall in place by themselves. The Singapore story has always been about us taking proactive action to transform our constraints into opportunities so that we can continue to build a better and more vibrant Singapore for the next generation. So let me share Singapore's approach towards this net zero transition. To achieve net zero by 2050, we will need to encourage businesses and individuals to be more energy efficient, reduce their energy consumption and carbon emissions, and adopt green energy alternatives. And all this will require fundamental shifts in the behavior of all households and firms. There are a variety of policy levers available to governments to drive this change. The carbon tax is one important lever to shape responsible behavior, as consumers and businesses will then have to internalize the cost of carbon emissions in their consumption and investment decisions. Earlier this year, I announced in our budget that Singapore will raise our carbon tax from the current $5 per ton of CO2 equivalent to about $50 to $80 by 2030. That translates to about $35 to $55. The carbon tax in Singapore is applied broadly, covering about 80% of our emissions today. We also have high petrol taxes, as Singaporeans here can attest to, and we do not subsidize fuel or electricity. Together, all this will help to sharpen the impetus of shifting to cleaner alternatives. We are mindful that carbon taxes will lead to higher costs for consumers and businesses alike during a time of high inflation. But we considered this very carefully, and we decided that a better approach is not to reduce or hold back the carbon tax, but to provide targeted relief to businesses and consumers, so that we have the right price signals for the economy as a whole, but for those who need help, we will extend help. For businesses, we have enhanced our support schemes to help them become more energy efficient. For households, the effects of the carbon tax will be felt primarily through an increase in their electricity bills. So we are helping households, especially the lower and middle income groups, with utilities vouchers to cushion the impact, and also with incentives to switch to more energy efficient appliances. So that's our general approach at making sure we can accelerate the shift to greener options. At the same time, we are investing more in technologies to help decarbonize our economy. And these new technologies are especially critical for the power sector. With the growing electrification of industries and industrial processes, it will become even more important to have greener power sources. In Singapore, power now accounts for almost 40% of our overall carbon emissions, the vast majority of which is generated from natural gas, as I mentioned just now. Decarbonizing the power sector is therefore a key focus of our climate efforts. We are maximizing the deployment of indigenous renewable energy resources available to us. We are already one of the most solar-dense cities in the world, and we are looking to do more wherever possible. By 2030, we should have approximately 2 gigawatt peak of solar energy, which can power up to 350,000 households on a sunny day. And we are also looking to tap on low-carbon energy beyond our shores. We have been working with regional partners to develop the ASEAN grid, and just this year, we have started importing hydroelectric power from Laos under the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project. But these efforts will not be sufficient. Even if we were to maximize all available space in Singapore for solar deployment, we will still not be able to generate enough electricity to keep the lights on. And there are also limits to how much low-carbon electricity we can import from the region. So given all of these constraints, we are looking seriously at other low-carbon alternatives. Alternatives that may be less technologically mature today, but show great potential. We have made our assessments, and we believe that low-carbon hydrogen is an increasingly promising solution. While the technology and supply chains are still nascent, momentum has picked up substantially in recent years. Global investment in low-carbon hydrogen has increased exponentially, backed by policies from countries around the world to accelerate its production and usage. And we are now seeing a growing pipeline of production projects worldwide. Key technologies across the value chain are also being trialed and are expected to become commercially available in the coming years. In short, the world is now standing at an inflection point in global hydrogen development. Given these positive developments, Singapore believes that low-carbon hydrogen has the potential to be the next frontier of our efforts to reduce our emissions. And this morning, I'm glad to announce the launch of Singapore's National Hydrogen Strategy. This will provide a roadmap of how hydrogen can support Singapore's decarbonization efforts and the steps we will be taking to prepare Singapore for a hydrogen future. As a clean fuel that can be used to generate electricity, low-carbon hydrogen can support our twin objectives of reducing carbon emissions and safeguarding our energy security. Hydrogen does not emit carbon dioxide when it is used as a fuel and can be imported from diverse source countries. And if technology continues to advance, we foresee that hydrogen can supply up to half of our power needs by 2050, alongside domestic renewable energy sources and electricity imports. Low-carbon hydrogen can also decarbonize activities that cannot be easily electrified in sectors that are critical to Singapore. In the industrial sector, for example, hydrogen can be used as feedstock in semiconductor plants and petrochemical processes. Besides lowering emissions, it also allows companies to produce sustainable products that could fetch a green premium. Meanwhile, in the aviation and maritime sectors, hydrogen can be used to produce low-carbon fuels. To unlock the potential of hydrogen, we will organize our efforts around 5 key thrusts. First, we will experiment with key hydrogen technologies and carrier pathways to understand how they can be deployed on a large scale in Singapore when they become economically viable. We will focus on those which have the potential to be commercially viable and have multiple applications. One good example is ammonia, a hydrogen carrier. In recent years, it has emerged both as a possible fuel for power generation as well as a low-carbon marine fuel. We will therefore kickstart our hydrogen efforts by issuing an expression of interest for a small-scale commercial project utilizing low-carbon ammonia for power generation. With this, Singaporeans may start to have access to electricity generated from low-carbon hydrogen from 2027. And through this project, we also hope to catalyze the development of ammonia supply chains for marine bunkering needs. More details will be announced by the Energy Market Authority in the coming months. Second, we will redouble efforts to support hydrogen research and development through the Low Carbon Energy Research Project, or ELSA in short. The ELSA was set up 2 years ago to support R&D efforts into low-carbon technologies, and a total of $55 million of research funding has been awarded to date. This year, we will set aside an additional $129 million, a significant amount of which will be directed towards projects that can help Singapore import, handle, and utilize hydrogen and its carriers safely and at scale. The government will play an active role in bringing industry players and research community together to improve translation from research towards real-world application. And we hope these R&D investments will help drive down costs and accelerate the technical viability and commercial scalability of hydrogen. Third, we will work with industry and international partners to facilitate global trade in low-carbon hydrogen and the establishment of supporting supply chains. As a net importer of low-carbon hydrogen, it is essential that we have reliable and diversified supplies of hydrogen. To this end, we aim to build a network of partnerships with like-minded countries and international organizations to facilitate the establishment of these supply chains, even at this nascent stage. And as a hub for aviation, maritime, and logistics, we believe that Singapore's involvement, for example, through pilot projects, can help the industry establish guidelines and standards, especially for the transportation, storage, and supply of low-carbon ammonia and hydrogen. One key focus area is to develop frameworks and standards to certify the low-carbon origin of hydrogen imports, such as through guarantee of origin certification that are recognized across different jurisdictions. And this will be crucial to providing hydrogen end users and the international community the assurance that the hydrogen being used is indeed sustainable and can support our climate goals. Fourth, we will study the land and infrastructure requirements needed to deploy low-carbon hydrogen in the longer term, because deploying hydrogen at scale in a highly built-up city like Singapore will require careful planning. As it has different properties from natural gas, we will likely need new storage and distribution infrastructure. And it is important that we lay the groundwork early so that we can be prepared to scale up the necessary infrastructure in future when the time is right. Finally, we will ready our industry and workforce for this hydrogen transition and put them in good state to capture new opportunities. A large global hydrogen economy will bring new activities and jobs across the entire supply chain. Some examples include hydrogen project financing, hydrogen trading, carbon verification and certification, as well as logistics solutions in the transportation, storage, and distribution of hydrogen. In Singapore, we have built up a tradition and a culture of having very close partnership between tripartite stakeholders, the government, employers, and the unions. So we will work with our tripartite partners, primarily the employers and unions, to develop these new capabilities and skills required to anchor such activities in Singapore. This national hydrogen strategy is a signal of Singapore's ambition to leverage the potential of hydrogen as a decarbonization pathway. More importantly, it's a rallying call to our industry and international partners to join us on this journey. I want to emphasize that this is by no means a plan cast in stone. We welcome new ideas and collaboration from all stakeholders to amplify our efforts and help us refine our approach. And we will also continue to adjust our strategy in line with technological and global supply chain developments. Singapore's plans are shaped by our own unique circumstances and stage of development. All countries, likewise, will have to find their own paths to a net zero future. At the same time, what is clear is that no country can decarbonize on its own. As our hydrogen plans show, international cooperation on multiple fronts will be necessary. One area of particular importance is green financing. Because if we are to make this generational climate transition, we will need to pool our collective resources together. Our collective decarbonization initiatives will not come cheap. By some estimates, several trillions of dollars in infrastructure investments will be needed over the next decade in Southeast Asia alone to enable the energy transition and to put the entire region on the path to net zero. And while there are many potential climate transition projects in Southeast Asia, many of them, unfortunately, are not bankable today. This has created a funding gap which must be bridged if the region and the world is to meet its climate goals. We will need closer collaboration between private capital, governments, philanthropy, and multilateral development banks to bring together financial resources, technical expertise, and capacity building to close the gap and make more projects viable. In particular, catalytic or concessionary capital from philanthropic organizations and multilateral development banks can help to share risk of these projects and crowd in private capital. And here, as an international financial center, we believe that Singapore is well positioned to contribute to these efforts. A key part of this work will require progress on several fundamental building blocks. We will need better data on projects. We will need more disclosure by companies, especially to address concerns about greenwashing. And we will need clearer definitions on what's considered green, what's considered brown, and importantly, what's considered activities that are transitioning from brown to green. So the 3Ds of data, disclosures, and definitions form the building blocks. And MAS, the central bank in Singapore, has been working with its regional counterparts and across various international forums on these key issues. As we strengthen these building blocks, we will also push for financial innovation and solutions in the sustainability space. For example, we will do more to encourage ASEAN green bonds and loan issuances, for which Singapore already accounts for a significant part of such issuances today, and we will develop and scale up blended finance structures. In short, we will make Singapore a green financial center to effectively channel green capital towards the development of transition projects and climate change solutions around the region. I have spoken today about our path to net zero. It will entail significant economic restructuring and changes to how we live and work in the future. And while this will no doubt be challenging, there are also many exciting possibilities in the future. For example, the growth of new sectors like green finance and carbon services, all of which will create new jobs and opportunities for Singaporeans. The built environment is another area with huge potential. The green transition will be an opportunity for us in Singapore to reimagine what our future city can become. We have already announced plans to convert our vehicle population to cleaner energy vehicles, to run on cleaner energy by 2040, and that promises quieter roads and fresher air. And we are also working on a sustainable industrial area at Jurong Island and a sustainable tourism area at Sentosa. We will now complement this by turning Jurong Lake District, which is a new growth area outside of our city center, into a world-class sustainable district. We will aim to have all new developments there to achieve net zero emissions by around 2045. And to meet this ambition, we will have to set new frontiers for sustainability practices within the district. In particular, all new developments in the district will be required to have super low energy or zero energy buildings. The buildings will have to be equipped with features like best-in-class energy efficiency requirement, intelligent energy management systems, as well as rooftop greenery to reduce cooling needs. And at the district level, we will need a centralized district cooling network, and we will also deploy solar on all suitable surfaces within the district, such as on rooftops, building facades, and empty plots of land. Finally, to make it highly livable, Jurong Lake District will be designed to be car light and support green mobility options, such as cycling and electric buses. This is what we will do within one district itself, but the public sector in Singapore as a whole will also do our part. We will aim to achieve net zero emissions across the public sector by around 2045, so slightly earlier than the net zero target for the country as a whole. As part of this goal, government agencies will increase the energy efficiency of their buildings to lower carbon emissions and eventually look to power them using renewable energy. All public sector cars will also run on cleaner energy. These efforts to reimagine our built environment will not be easy to achieve, but if we can do all this, we can give the next generation in Singapore a highly livable, exciting, and sustainable city to call home. To conclude this morning, I've sketched out our climate ambitions and the specific steps we will take to realize them in Singapore. As you can see, our net zero path is not an easy one, but we have chosen to boldly commit ourselves to this journey because we believe we have a responsibility to do our part in this global climate transition effort. We will do our part to accelerate our green transition and achieve net zero because we want to leave behind a greener and better country for our future generations of Singaporeans. We will also contribute to climate solutions for the region and work closely with other like-minded countries to advance the green agenda, like the trailblazing green economy agreement we signed with Australia recently. Each of you sitting here will have your own set of climate ambitions and plans. But if we are to collectively succeed, and we surely must, all of us will need to work together. Governments will need to set common standards and frameworks for international climate cooperation, adopt clear domestic mitigation policies, and make crucial investments where necessary. Businesses will need to drive the sustainability agenda in their respective sectors, and individuals, all of us as individuals, will need to make lifestyle adjustments and adopt more sustainable habits. We have all the right people gathered here at this conference, ministers from around the region, leaders from across the public and private sectors, and representatives from international organizations. I hope that over the next few days, you will be able to share your experiences, exchange perspectives, and form meaningful partnerships. With that, I wish all of you a fruitful and productive time at this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DPM Wong, sir. We invite you to make your way to your seat. Thank you, sir. And now, ladies and gentlemen, with the SIEW Summit opening address, I'd like to invite Minister Gan Kim Yong, Minister for Trade and Industry, to deliver this opening address. Let's welcome him with a round of applause, shall we, ladies and gentlemen?
All yours, sir.
Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us this morning. For several years now, energy transition has been a key theme of Singapore International Energy Week. And with each passing year, the urgency to transit increases. The UN climate report issued in April this year concluded that unless bold actions are taken to cut emissions, the world is on track to more than double the 1.5 degrees warming limit set in the Paris Agreement. Deputy Prime Minister Wong talked about Singapore's commitment to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Let me share our plans to strengthen our energy market structure to facilitate this transition. The journey of energy transition is like embarking on a sea voyage. The destination is quite clear: clean and reliable energy, sufficient to meet our needs in the future. However, the journey is long and full of unanticipated twists and turns. Sometimes there are technological advancements that will help to speed up our passage. Other times, there are storms and setbacks that we need to avert and survive before we can continue with the journey. This year, we are facing a perfect storm. On one hand, there were shortages in fossil fuel production, triggered by underinvestment in energy projects and exacerbated by the Ukraine war. On the other hand, there were severe disruptions in renewable power in many parts of the world, arising from droughts and unexpected weather patterns. Global oil prices spiked significantly and reached more than $130 per barrel at its peak, about 10 times higher than the trough in April 2020. Spot gas prices saw even more volatility, with the Japan-Korea marker exceeding $84 per MMBTU at its peak, more than 40 times the lows in April 2020. Consequently, electricity prices in many markets rose multiple folds. Countries around the world have introduced stabilizing measures to cope with the surging prices and energy disruptions. Some have trimmed their sails, so to speak, introducing price caps, suspending markets, and nationalizing market players. Others have changed course and turned back to coal to meet their energy needs, in the short term at least. Singapore imports almost all of our energy supply, so our energy market will inevitably be affected by global turbulence. As fuel prices surged, our electricity market was severely tested. First, the high gas prices made power companies reluctant to contract for gas, for fear that they will be left holding expensive gas supplies should prices soften subsequently. If power companies all decide to cut back on their gas purchase, the system as a whole will not have secured enough gas for us. As an emergency measure, EMA introduced a standby fuel facility, as well as mandated each firm to contract sufficient fuel. Second, we observed that the wholesale electricity market could not function rationally under extreme price volatility. When prices in the wholesale market surged, instead of inducing more electricity supply, some generation companies decided to withhold supply for fear that should there be an unexpected disruption in their supplies, they would have to buy at even higher prices from the wholesale market to meet their commitments. This caused prices in the wholesale market to surge even further. It also adversely impacted some consumers who purchase electricity directly from the wholesale market. Again, EMA stepped in with measures like the Temporary Electricity Contract Support Scheme, or TREX in short, to bridge the gap. Third, some market participants were not sufficiently equipped to deal with the extreme market volatilities. Most evidently, in the fourth quarter of last year, 6 electricity retailers exited the market. Some affected consumers were transferred to the Singapore Power to ensure that their power supply is not disrupted. The emergency measures that EMA implemented have stabilized the market for now. However, this is unlikely to be the last energy crunch we will face. The global clean energy transition will also not a plain sailing one, and we can expect continued volatility going forward. To navigate the dual challenges of energy transition and energy security, we need to strengthen our energy market structure. Since the 1990s, we have operated an open energy market. This has served us well, and many consumers have enjoyed low electricity prices as a result of competition. But the energy landscape has changed significantly in recent years, and new challenges have emerged, as I highlighted earlier. We will need to adjust our energy market structure to respond to these changes. Overall, a market-based system remains relevant, but we will need to strengthen the market structure and put in guardrails to ensure that the market continues to function well, even under volatile conditions. Let me broadly outline our plans in 3 key areas: power generation capacity, gas supply, and retail markets. First, we have to ensure that we have sufficient power generation capacity going forward. Today, planting decisions are made by private generation companies, which may be based on various factors such as their own business plans or their outlook for electricity demand. While each of them will make rational decisions individually, there is no assurance that this will translate into sufficient generation capacity for our needs nationally. Higher electricity prices are the usual signal to companies that capacity is tight and new planting is needed. However, the response may be too late, since it will take 4 to 5 years to build new capacity. In the meantime, there will be a shortage of generation capacity. Conversely, there's also a risk of uncoordinated multiple plantings, leading to excess supply. Investment in generation capacity is a major undertaking with a long payback period. A volatile market in the short term, uncertain long-term outlook, and potential stranding of assets due to the energy transition make long-term investment decisions in generation capacity difficult for the private generation companies. Therefore, to ensure that we have sufficient generation capacity in time to come, we will need to plan for capacity building at the national level. We will therefore introduce a centralized approach to facilitate and guide private investments in new generation capacity through a competitive tender as and when needed for capacity that will be required within the next 5 years. Interested participants can participate in the process, and the most competitive proposal will be awarded a license to build, own, and operate the new capacity. No new plantings will be allowed outside of this process to provide greater certainty to investors and avoid the risk of overcapacity. Should there be inadequate interest to plant new capacity, EMA will build the required new capacity. This approach will ensure adequate capacity to meet our energy needs in the future. Second, having ensured adequate capacity, we have to also enhance the resilience of our gas supplies. Today, generation companies in Singapore have significant flexibility to decide on the amount and duration of gas contracts. While this flexibility was intended to allow GenCos to benefit from a competitive gas market, it does not provide sufficient assurance that there will be enough gas overall in the system as a whole to meet our energy needs. Generation companies may also tend to adopt a herding behavior in response to the fluctuations in the gas market when it comes to contracting gas. Such bunching of contracts magnifies Singapore's exposure to market trends, which is a cause for concern if this occurs during volatile market conditions or when there are major supply disruptions. Late last year, when the global energy market tightened due to a cold winter and worsening security situation, EMA had to introduce temporary crisis management measures to ensure energy security. This includes requiring GenCos to maintain sufficient fuel for power generation and establishing a standby fuel facility to guard against the risk of gas supply disruptions. We will institutionalize these as permanent features of our market. In addition, EMA will work with the industry to explore ways to aggregate gas procurement and obtain longer-term, and more secure contracts. Last but not least, we will strengthen the retail electricity market. EMA has progressively liberalized the retail market over the years and allowed more electricity retailers to participate in selling electricity to consumers. Consumers benefited from a wider range of retail contracts and have more choices. Competition among retailers also drove down electricity prices for consumers. Over the past few years, before the start of the energy crisis, average wholesale electricity prices were below cost of production due to the oversupply of gas and generation capacity. However, when the gas market tightened late last year and prices rose sharply, several independent retailers exited the market. This suggests that some of these retailers were not sufficiently prepared against market volatilities and had taken large unhedged positions. Going forward, we plan to strengthen consumer protection by enhancing the regulatory requirements on electricity retailers, so that only credible industry players with sufficient financial strength and sustainable business models will be allowed to retail electricity to consumers, and to ensure that electricity retailers are sufficiently resilient against market volatility. On the consumer side, EMA will also look into tightening the eligibility criteria for wholesale electricity price plans, or WEP plans, so that only consumers who are able to deal with the risk of price volatilities will be allowed to buy at the WEP. All consumers can still enter into retail contracts, while consumers who qualify for the regulated tariffs can also continue to do so. We are mindful that these adjustments will reduce the flexibility of some market participants. Generation companies cannot plant new capacity as they wish. Consumers may have fewer retailers to choose from. Some may not be allowed to purchase electricity from the wholesale electricity market. However, these measures will bring about a stronger and more secure power system. We will consult the industry and the public on these proposed changes and put them in place progressively. Having strengthened our ship, we will be able to focus on our journey towards net zero emission. This is a challenging but worthwhile and necessary journey. navigating the dual challenges of energy transition and security will require a collective effort. The only way for us to get to our destination safely is for us to work together. Only when everyone is on board can we ensure that no one is left behind. We invite everyone in Singapore, power providers, researchers, and consumers to embark on this journey with us together. We will also work with our international partners to develop and strengthen supply chains and cooperate on market and regulatory actions to facilitate a stable global energy market. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a robust discussion at our Singapore Energy Summit later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Gan, sir. We invite you to remain on stage to present the Singapore Energy Award. Thank you, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Singapore Energy Award recognizes organizations and individuals who have made significant contribution to Singapore's energy sector. Sembcorp Solar Singapore Private Limited has been conferred this year's Singapore Energy Award for its effort, impact, and contribution in developing Singapore's solar industry. Now, I'll tell you more about it a little later on. It is with pleasure at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, that I invite them up on stage from Sembcorp Solar Singapore, its Board Director, Ms. Jen Tan, and General Manager, Fendi Nur Salim, to receive this award. Let's welcome them with a round of applause, shall we? Shall we have a photograph taken? There we go. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Sembcorp Solar. Thank you all. We invite you to take your seats.